And I never really understood the Bible, and I was always the kid who had to be dragged out of bed to go to church. My mom always told my brother, sister, and me that we didn't have to go to church because we believed in God, but we had to go because it was a community of people that cared about us. I usually just grumbled and rolled my eyes at that comment. However, when COVID hit, I realized just how big church was in my life. A piece of today's gospel reads, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus showed his love for others many times throughout his life. In the passage before this, we see Jesus washing his disciples' feet, a very important sign of love, an example of love through service. In this gospel, Jesus is saying, "Wash each other's feet just as I have washed yours. Do the dirty work for others just as I have done it for you." St. Paul's members love each other. I'm sure each one of you has an example of this love. I know I have hundreds of examples that come to mind, but here are a few highlights. Carnella rolling up to me next to me at a stoplight as I was on my way to homecoming and yelling at me to show her my dress. My mom and dad making phone calls to members of the church during COVID. Watching Zora Hatcher cheer for Ada while she sings in the youth choir. Going out of my way twice to visit Dale in Pennsylvania. Like I said, I have hundreds of these little moments of happy love from people I've met here at church. However, a big moment of love for me here at church is my friendship with J.R. Wagner and Ryan Johnson. To be completely honest, I do not entirely remember how this friendship started. I just know that somehow it became a friendship. I can say the biggest act of love that this friendship shows one another is showing up. Showing up to just about anything, even if it's something you don't really want to do. When one asks, at least one of the other two goes. I can picture the countless mornings I dragged Ryan and JR with me to church because I was being dragged too and didn't want to be alone. Just this morning, we called him and dragged him here. Ryan came with me freshman year to homecoming because I didn't know anyone and I didn't want to be alone. Right now, the three of us are in a debate about Harlan because no one wants to go alone. We show up for each other, do the things we might not want to do because the other two might not want to be alone. That is what Jesus is trying to tell us through this gospel. Happy love is so much fun, and so are those little moments I read to you earlier. But love through service is by far the most impactful and is a true act of love. It is clear that God loves this congregation because of the love we have for one another. St. Paul's has been such a large part of my childhood, and I'm forever grateful for the people that spread God's message of love inside these walls. Whether it be through service or little happy moments, each precious example of love has made its impact. Now, 6 years after joining St. Paul's, I can say, although I might not be the godliest teenager, I am starting to understand God's message a little bit more. It's a message of love, of coming together, a message of community and sacrifice for one another.
Good morning. I'm Erin, and as a graduating senior, there are a lot of goodbyes happening this year, especially for me because I decided to go to a college that is a 10-hour drive away from the only place I've ever lived. So, while I read this passage about Jesus leaving his disciples, I probably interpret it in a different way than you might. If I choose to read this passage through the lens of my graduation, I feel that when Jesus is telling his disciples, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him," I see it as him saying that his time in the community with his disciples is over. That he had grown and changed as a result of their love, but now he had to leave them. Similarly, my life has been so changed by this community, but now I will have to leave it, with all the lessons it has taught me. Jesus says, "I am with you only a little longer." When I think of all the people I will leave here, not alone, but with the communities they have built, I would hope they can follow the same advice Jesus gave them, to love. Love is something that has been a constant in my faith journey. Throughout the past 3 years, and especially since the start of the pandemic, my religious beliefs have changed as I have had time and space to reflect. Aided by the pandemic, I have taken time away from church services, and in this period of absence, I learned what parts of services stuck with me and which practices I didn't connect with. And while I'm still exploring my beliefs, I am being guided by my experience at St. Paul's, the messages of Christianity I grew up with being filled with love and acceptance. Now, with where I am currently in my faith journey, I know that there's no shame in coming to church for the things I did miss in my time away. my friends, being an acolyte, singing, and being part of this community. While I might not connect with all the prayers or all the readings, I can take what impacts me out of the teachings I hear. Love is one of the teachings I have always connected with, and I think in this time of change and at this point in my faith journey, that is the lesson I'm going to choose to carry with me. The simple message that Jesus is telling his disciples in this reading is that your love will set you apart. In a world that so often now feels filled with hate, we can choose as people, not just as Christians, to love unconditionally. And as I move forward in my life, I hope that people will remember my love and that I can continue to spread love and acceptance in the future.
Hello, I'm Ryan Johnson, and let me start this off by saying I've never been good at goodbyes. But as the end of my senior year approaches and my time at St. Paul's draws to an end, it is clear there will have to be a lot of goodbyes. The problem is I've made countless memories and met some of my closest friends here at St. Paul's, and the thought of leaving this place that has been such a big part of my life for so long is almost unimaginable to me. Recently, I found myself thinking about how Jesus and the people around him prepared for his departure in hopes that I would find some guidance on how I can leave such a big part of my life behind. During today's gospel, often referred to as the farewell discourse, Jesus says his last goodbyes to his disciples before he's sent off to be crucified. During this, Jesus gives his disciples some advice on how they should come to terms with his departure, telling them that they should continue to love one another and not let his death split them apart. Although Jesus was in a far more dramatic situation than I am in now, I can still use what he told his disciples as guidance for how I can say goodbye to all the people that I've come to know here. This doesn't mean that leaving St. Paul's will not be hard. I will still miss causing chaos during youth group on Sunday evenings, having poodle fights in the lake after roofing houses under the scorching sun at Harlan, building a makeshift swing out of scrap wood with J.R. Wagner and Anna Banyard, and maybe most of all, pushing J.R. around in a wheelbarrow at midnight during our trip to the Rosebud Reservation. Leaving this community that has become such a huge part of my life over the last 18 years won't be easy, but by continuing to love one another and not forgetting the good times that I've had and the people that I've met, hopefully it will be a little bit easier. Thank you.